I'm Adam Olivero, and thank you very much for joining me for this special documentary surrounding first responders and their mental health. I just want to give a special shout out to Leslie Motors, who sponsored this documentary. Thank you very much for your support, Leslie Motors. We'll be talking to some first responders all across the field of different experiences they've had, and it should be quite worthwhile and interesting, so sit back and enjoy, and we'll get on with our first interview. I'm here now with Doug Sharp, who's a captain currently with the Kitchener Fire Department. And Doug, thanks very much for being here to talk about this. And one of the things that we wanted to start talking about too was there's the stigma surrounding fire halls and the first responder community. Can you talk a little bit about the things you've been working towards in the 25 years you've been doing work with first responders and fire departments?
Yeah, stigma has tended to be one of our biggest stumbling blocks when trying to get people help.
Right.
So what we have found is that it takes a long time to break that stigma. Yeah. So I got involved in 95 with the peer support team, and 25 years later the stigma has decreased quite a bit. So it just takes a constant, consistent message so the people, the firefighters on the floor feel comfortable with it, and that it's consistent. Right. And so over time they will accept it. So the stigma now for Kitchener is a lot better than it used to be, and when we break the stigma, people are more apt to get help. Yeah. And that's going to be better for everybody.
Yeah, so we jumped right in there, but maybe for people who are watching who don't have a first responder in their family, mm-hmm. or they don't know what it's like to be in a fire hall in a full-time position, what is that stigma? Is it for lack of a better word, is it like an old boys club where you shouldn't talk about those kinds of things? Is that where it was 25, 30 years ago?
25, 30 years ago, you just didn't talk about it.
Right.
It was toughen up.
Yeah.
And because you don't want to look weak, right. or present as weak. Because sometimes what we do is pretty difficult, and there isn't really a lot of time. So you don't want to represent as weak to the other firefighters. And if you start dwelling on calls and asking a lot of questions and you let it bother you, then you're afraid people are going to see you as weak. Right. And so we don't want to be weak. We don't want to be seen as weak. So you just don't talk about it. But the double-edged sword is that the more you don't talk about it and the more you don't address it, that eventually it catches up to you.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's why breaking the stigma is so important. Mm-hmm. Because the more we can break the stigma, and people are more willing to seek out help earlier, and so they don't actually get to the disorder. So PTSD, the D is the disorder. I think everybody has post-traumatic stress if you're a first responder, but when you get to the D, that's the disorder, and that's where the problems start. So if we can break the stigma and people are more comfortable to talk about it and seek out help earlier, then we're going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's the big thing for sure, is getting to them earlier and saying that they can talk about it earlier. And we were talking before we sat down about that term PTSD, right. And how for a firefighter it's a little different. We were kind of saying like PTSD really came from the military side of things, right? And not that it, like every first responder or a person that's in a stressful situation has some level of that, but it's a little different for you guys and for the first responders on the ground here, because a military person can be taken out of the situation that caused that PTSD, whether they were overseas or at a military base, where mm-hmm. as a firefighter you may drive by a property that you were at just a few nights ago at a fire call every day.
Yeah, so PTSD is an interesting term, and it was coined around the early 70s, and mostly directly for Vietnam vets. Right. And so the word post, the first word, is a bit of a conundrum for me, because trauma in first responders is not post. Right. Every day we go to work, the likelihood of us engaging in a traumatic incident is very high. And we really wouldn't be post-traumatic until we retire. Right. And a lot of the modalities that treat post-traumatic stress will actually indicate that the person cannot be in a stressful, traumatic situation for it to be successful. So it has to be post. So I think we need to look at different ways of helping first responders deal with the traumatic stress that is current or accumulative every day. So, and that would be really the biggest difference between the military. When the military comes back, like you mentioned, they're out of that zone, they're in a safe place, and they can move forward. Kind of technically, we're not in a safe place until we retire. So we could be in that zone of possible traumatic stress for 37 years.
Well, even then, you could still have a trigger when you're retired, if you retired to the same community you've been serving for those 30 years, and you happen to be cruising down the street one day. And
so the city I live in is there's clusters all over the city that remind me of the calls.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably the best way I can relate it for somebody who's not in the first responder field, like myself, is if you've been in a bad car accident, that feeling you get if you drive by that same intersection every time. But that, you guys get that not just from that one intersection, you get it from here, like you said,
all over the city.
Yeah, so it must be quite hard, and it's something that you guys, I'm glad you're breaking down the stigma around it, because it's something that we all need to talk about, right?
Yeah, I think it's important, and it's important for us, it's important for our families.
Yeah.
Like, the healthier we can keep ourselves, the better it's going to be for our families.
Right. You know, your family doesn't experience everything you experience in the job every day, so how can you guys work together as a family unit to help each other?
That's a great question, and that is something in Kitchener right now that we're really trying to focus on.
Right.
So in a couple of weeks, actually next month, we have a family night. Oh. And at this family night, the firefighters will come out with their spouses, significant others, and we have different speakers lined up, and we have some psychologists and family therapists, and we're really trying to engage the families.
Cool.
And give them options, and give them a bit of an insight to what the job is like, and give them options and people they can call if they're having troubles.
Right.
And that's a big part of it right now. We're really learning that the family core at home is the most important, and people at home are going to see the differences in the first responder before the first responder, or even other people that know the first responder. Yeah. So they're the first line of defense, and we have to keep the people at home healthy.
Oh, absolutely.
And giving them the options and that education is very important. So making a plan, so one of the best things that a firefighter and a significant other or any emergency service person can do is make a plan ahead of time.
Okay.
So for myself, for instance, I know that if I come home from shift and I've had a bad call, my wife and I have made a plan, and she would know not to ask me 1,000 questions.
Right. That's your guys' plan. That works for you guys.
That's right. So everybody's going to have a different plan that works for them.
Absolutely.
So when I come home, and if she does start with questions, I can tell her I've had a difficult call, and she'll know enough to back off for a bit.
Right.
And I will come to her and give her some details when I'm ready,
right,
but not to push me.
Yeah.
So that's a plan that we made ahead of time. And like you said, it could be different for everybody, but planning ahead of time to deal with the stressful situations is important, because when you're in the stressful situation, you're not going to have the cognitive ability to solve it.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
So pre-planning is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see that for sure. It's kind of like, you know, planning for your financial retirement before you're 90.
Exactly. Right. I'm retired. What do I do now?
Yeah,
How do I save? No, you should have done that 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So planning is important.
For sure. So another bill that came into play for first responders in Ontario specifically was Bill 163. And I think we were looking up before we started that it came in about 2016.
April, yeah.
Yeah. What could talk to us a bit about that? What does that bill do?
So that bill 163, is really important in a lot of ways, because it essentially made post-traumatic stress disorder and first responders. So presumptive legislation basically means that if somebody is diagnosed with PTSD, then their claim will be accepted with WSIB, Workmen's Safety Insurance Board. Before that date, before 2016, if you got diagnosed with PTSD, you had to prove it, and that was difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's helped us in a lot of ways, because now it's going to be easier for people who are suffering to get the help they need. Right. And also, it actually states in the bill that any employer that if there's an employer that has one of these 4 emergency first responders, they have to have a PTSD plan in place to help mitigate the effects of PTSD. So they have to have an active plan in place.
So you've been with that peer support team in Kitchener since 1995?
95, yeah. I was hired in 92,
Wow.
and in 95 I joined the team.
Wow, that's great. So how have you seen things change from 95 to today? Has it been a massive improvement?
Massive.
Oh, good.
We've made more strides in getting support from the city, breaking down the stigma. I would say the last 5 years took me 15 years.
Right.
And we're hiring younger, newer people, and they're more open. They've grown up in a different atmosphere, and they're more accepting, I think, of help.
Good.
And so when we hire somebody now, they're going to get introduction to trauma, stress, resilience training right off the bat. So that's all they know. They come in, and it's an everyday thing. And over time, that's going to be really beneficial for the service and the cities. People are going to be healthier, and people are going to save money because they're going to accept it. So we've had to fight against the stigma to get people to accept it, and now people are going to accept it quicker.
Good.
And that's because the younger generation is more accepting, I think, of the new ideas.
Good. So your 25 years of doing this has paid off at this point, because you've gone the whole generation in every year.
You can almost say I've been waiting 25 years for these days. Bill 163, and to see this progression to the point now where it is great, because people are getting the help.
Good.
And I can see that. I see that on the floor. People will actually mention in a casual conversation that they talked to somebody, or their wife went to talk to somebody and it really helped. And those are conversations we never had, maybe even 10 years ago.
As you said, as you're hiring them, you're getting them on that plan the second they're hired.
That's
You're
right.
not waiting.
So it's an expectation they're given.
Yeah.
And if you're given that expectation right off the start, and you go out and you train and you cut cars apart and you fight fires and you talk to mental health professionals, it's just standard practice.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your time.
Thank you.
I'm here now with Brian Stevens, the creator and founder of Frontline Forward. And Brian, maybe we could start with that. I know you're a former paramedic and a former on the Orange Helicopter Service.
Yeah.
But let's go forward to today and talk about Frontline Forward. And what is that? It's a gym designed for first responders, right?
It is. Our doors are open to absolutely everybody and anybody that's looking to become healthier and happier, both physically and mentally. So our doors are open to everybody, but the focus group that I'm trying to reach out to lend a helping hand to the most is the first responder community, for which I served for 30 years. So I'm reaching out to, the paramedics, police officers, firefighters, nurses and doctors, corrections officers, our 911 communications officers, our military personnel, and their husbands and wives and sons and daughters.
Great.
Yeah.
Where is it located then, so people
We're
know?
located in Kitchener, 45 Shirley Avenue. It's an 8,200 square foot facility.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a big place. And we've got a big fully functional gym with heavy weight and cardio equipment, and then we have a very specialized fitness program called Move Strong, which really speaks well to the first responder community. It's a very specialized program, one that's going to put a lot of longevity and happiness into a lot of the first responders and their family members. We've got a yoga meditation studio, big workshop room where guest speakers come in and talk about the current events. And then we also have chiropractic care. We have the Brain Health Coach program. We're doing neural feedback right now, so it's brain mapping to help show individuals really where their thought process is stuck in the brain and how we can work around that. And we also have a massage therapy, hypnotherapy, and one-on-one and group counseling.
Cool. So you said this is open to anybody? Because I could come down and use it. It's
Absolutely.
wonderful.
No, you're more than welcome. And we're open 24/7.
Okay.
Key fob access gets in, and we tried to make our lobby to be just like your home. So it's got 3 big lazy boy chairs that are super comfortable. TV there to watch, local sports or a movie, or we have lots of literature there. And the biggest part of it is we're just asking people to just come and be with us, turn the fireplace on in our lobby area, and just sit and having a pleasant conversation.
Right, or if you're taking a break in between exercises, you have a comfy place to chill.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when we did these documentaries at Deborah, you were on during the first one we had 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And 4 years ago, we just had like concept drawings, and this is great news that now it's a reality in here.
We're here now. We got something tangible for us to actually see, and our response has been it's been fantastic.
Good.
Yeah, it took us a while to get going for the first responder community to know that we were there, but they're all fully aware that we're there now, and they're coming through the doors more and more every day. And like I said earlier, really responding well to the Move Strong program, because it's a nice alternative to the gym and what the gym brings. But the company slogan that I come up with was to feel healthy, feel safe, and feel strong. That's what we promote at our place. We're all about education and awareness, of making people better educated about their physical and mental health, and making them aware of just what's available in the community and what we offer and what we can do to help you be that much better. And all we ask of anybody coming through our door, it doesn't matter which modality or which area of the facility you go to, we're just asking people to be 1% better today than you were yesterday.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Where could people go if they want more information? Do you have like a website they can check out?
Absolutely. So we're all over social media now. I'm not on the social media. I have people that do that, but my daughter looks after our social media. So we're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the whole bit. But we're real proud of our website. So it's www.frontlineforward.com. Everything is there. I give a little virtual tour of the place on the website, and a little bit of a bio and history of what I'm all about.
Cool. Well, let's go to that then. A little bit of your history, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
You were a paramedic with the Orange Helicopter Service.
I was, yeah. So I worked 30 years as a first responder. I worked 12 years for the Region of Peel, worked primarily in the city of Mississauga. The last 2 years that I was there, I also worked for a company called Sky Service, where I got on with the critical care transport team. So I worked with a team of nurses, doctors, and respiratory techs, and we flew around the world on a Learjet.
Wow.
Bringing sick and injured Canadians back home. Exhausting job, but a great job, and that really was a preset for me for moving into working for Canadian. At that time, it was Canadian Helicopters, and then we progressed into Orange. But yeah, I worked 18 years as a critical care flight paramedic. My entire career was out of the London base. Very proud to be part of that group of people. We're a very specialized group.
Yeah.
We're the highest trained, educated, and certified paramedics in Canada.
Wow.
We got a big job to do. They have a big job to do, and we're trained to the highest level care. We're trained by the best trauma doctors, ICU, CCU intensivists, pediatricians, specialized pediatric docs in trauma and medical cases. So our mandate was to look after the most traumatized people from car accidents or industrial or farming accidents. And we're very highly trained in all facets of very complicated medical cases. Right. So what our job was to do was to go in when smaller centers had exhausted their resources. They asked us to come in to take these people to higher tertiary care centers so that they could get the specialized care that they need. Yeah.
And the area is very big, right? Like London, the area you would cover, and from the London base, probably goes quite a distance, like up to Owen Sound, all the way down to Windsor, like basically Midwestern Ontario.
The area that London covered, so we were from Windsor to Tobermory, Lionshead, north and south, and Sarnia to Fort Erie or Buffalo, east and west.
Wow. That's a big area to cover.
Big area, but we traveled 300 kilometers an hour in a straight line, no traffic, so no traffic lights and
No traffic.
and no radar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if you wouldn't mind me talking about some of the incidents you're at, since we're in Walkerton here, you were like boots on the ground for the Walkerton water tragedy, and if you don't mind talking a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm extremely proud, honored to say that I was part of the critical care team that came into this community right here in Walkerton to look after this community when it was in crisis.
And I'm sure the community is thankful for that too.
Yeah, we have a pretty special bond with the hospital staff here and with the EMS and the OPP that work this area, as well as the fire agencies, and yeah, it really solidified a great working relationship with everybody.
Right. So going from that big event then to where you're at the gym, so in the intervening years, you at some point were diagnosed with PTSD yourself, just due to the work environment you're in.
Yeah.
There's not much you can really avoid. You're in a very high stress environment with a lot of critical calls.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've estimated that I've responded to somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 calls.
Wow.
And being in the air ambulance field, you know, our job was to look after the most traumatized and the highest sick level patient there was, medically related patients. So. Most, if not all of our calls were very involved. So yes, I looked after myself from a physical standpoint. I was always a gym rat, as they call it. But I did that as well as I was a hockey player and I highly involved with hockey. So I looked after myself from a physical standpoint. I just dropped the ball with looking after my mental health. And in 2015, I was subsequently diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I worked for about the next 18 months trying different treatment modalities and therapies, but had to come down to make the healthy decision for myself and for my family. And I took early retirement and removed myself from the frontline services in 2017.
Yeah, for sure. And that brings you right back circle to where we started with the gym.
Exactly. Yeah. So it brings me back to that, and I'm proud to say that we're doing a big job. Our team down there, we call it our team, our family at Frontline Forward. We're all dedicated to that one purpose and just making people 1% better tomorrow.
Good. Well, thank you for coming on and talking to us. And I'm sure if the viewers out there are listening and they want a nice gym with a friendly atmosphere and they're cruising by Kitchener, come and stop in and see you.
Absolutely. 24/7, we're there. Come on in.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Here now with Dave McLennan from Boots on the Ground. And Dave, if we could just start with, what is Boots on the Ground? How did that program get started, especially for people that may not be first responders? They might not have heard of Boots on the Ground.
Right. Boots on the Ground was basically what we are is a 24/7 peer support helpline for first responders. So any first responder, police, fire, EMS, corrections, both sworn members and civilian members can call our helpline 24 hours a day and speak to a volunteer live. Volunteers are trained and they can help you through any situation you're going through, and then they can refer you to a professional afterwards after we've spoken to you.
All right. So other than that, is that kind of the core service about what Boots on the Ground offers, is just that first line response if I'm having a problem at work?
It is. It can be a problem at work, it can be a problem at home, it can be any problem that's going on. We also offer in the GTA right now in-person service. So if you want to speak to someone, you'd rather meet for a coffee rather than talk to someone over the phone, we'll send 2 volunteers out to see you. We're in the process of expanding that to be province-wide in the near future as well.
Right, as you get more volunteers on and trained and such, that will become province-wide eventually.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
great. So where did you get this idea from then? Where did you all of a sudden go, I really need to do this? Is it just kind of to help support your fellow first responders?
Yeah, to help support my fellow first responders. I was approaching retirement and I wanted something to do in my retirement. I was looking for options in the peer support world, and actually was fortunate enough to meet people from the Public Health and Safety Association, and they helped us form a steering committee, and we just formed the program from there, and it exploded from there.
Cool. And when you say exploded, we were talking before we started that it really did explode. You got a lot of volunteers really quickly, but the volunteers, if I could ask the volunteers, can they come from from the first responder world, or could I become a volunteer if I really felt like I wanted to give back to first responders?
Right now, they come from the first responder world, so we have frontline police, fire, EMS, and corrections answering our phone lines.
Right.
We also have civilian members of those services who are trained and on standby. If someone would rather speak to a civilian member, then we can have them available to speak to someone if need be.
Okay. And how much the volunteers, how much training did they have to go through before they're ready to go in person or talk on the phone with somebody?
Right now, they receive 4.5 days training before they even get on the phone. So they get 2 days of peer support training, 2 days of suicide prevention training, and half a day of our policies and procedures.
Right.
After that, they get another day of mental health first aid training.
Yeah, and that's very important because generally when somebody's calling boots on the ground, it's going to be a very tense, traumatic situation where they're calling you, right?
It could be, yeah. And it's important to have trained volunteers on the phone that have some lived experience as well and have been through similar situations so they can understand, they can empathize with the person that they're speaking to.
Yeah. Where could people go if they wanted to find out more information about Boots on the Ground?
They can go to our website at bootsontheground.ca, and there's information there about resources available to people, about volunteering, about any information you want to know about Boots on the Ground. It's on our website, and also other social media outlets.
Okay. And there is sometimes some stigma involved in some forces where they feel like they don't want to reach out, or if they reach out, they don't want it to get back to their employer. How does that kind of work with you guys then if somebody called?
Yeah, that's how we designed our program. So by starting this program, we're not saying that the employers are doing a bad job. There's very good work programs out there, but we believe there's a certain percentage of the population that just won't go to work for help.
Right.
Fears of stigma and confidentiality and knowing the person they're calling for help. It could be a coworker. Mm-hmm. So we designed an anonymous program so we can hopefully combat some of the stigma and confidentiality issues. So when people call our 833 number, all you have to do is tell me you're a firefighter or a police officer, corrections, or EMS. That's all the information you need to give. I don't need your name, where you live, where you work, and we can provide the assistance. So then you don't have to worry about it getting back to anybody you know. Our 1-833 number doesn't have call display, so we don't see your phone number, and we don't take notes on the call. So there's no record or no information kept, and there's no concern about it getting back to anybody you know because we don't even know who you are when we're talking to you.
Right on. Well, that's a very good thing. Like you said, yeah, there is that stigma surrounding that maybe I don't want to reach out if it's going to get back to my employer. How's it going to affect my employment? So that's a really good way you've designed it then.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about Boots on the Ground then? Or where are you going for the future?
Where we're going for the future is right now we're trying to get everybody in the province aware that we're available for them. And we're trying to expand our in-person services. So right now we have the GTA, and now we're looking for volunteers in the north. We're looking for volunteers out down here in the west end of the province and in the east end of the province. So we're trying to expand our volunteer base outside of the GTA.
Right.
And we do have volunteers across the province, but we want to expand that base. And we just want to get more awareness out there right now so everybody knows we're available. There's somebody who you can talk to 24/7 who cares, who understands, and that can help you out.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dave.
Thank you very much.
I'm here now with Graham Trude, who is an Afghanistan veteran and current serving police officer in Ontario. And Graham, you are known as the singing soldier, kind of, right?
Yeah, so the organization that I'm with, it's a national band called the Singing Soldiers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and what we promote through that band is trauma healing through music therapy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, talk to me a bit about your background then, being in Afghanistan and how you've come to this foundation then.
Yeah, so my background is I was in Afghanistan in 2009. I was with a tank regiment out in Edmonton. From there, I went into the Anishinaabe Police Service.
Okay.
It's a mouthful. And it's a First Nations, flying First Nation service.
Right.
So I went there, I did that for 2 years, and then I moved down to the town of Orangeville. So I've been out there for the last few years and just really enjoying it.
Good.
Yeah.
And so at some point where you say you were diagnosed with PTSD then?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed actually in 2017. I had been going through a bunch of symptoms and whatnot. I was very symptomatic and I didn't really know what was wrong with me at the time. I thought I was just going crazy, to be honest with you. So what I ended up doing is going in and getting observed by a doctor and whatnot, and through that assessment they diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress, which was almost a relief.
Okay.
Just because it's nice to know kind of what's going on. I think the scariest thing in the world is to not know what's happening with you physically and mentally, because there's a lot of symptoms that happen in both of those areas. So it gets kind of scary, but you know, it was a breath of fresh air almost, being diagnosed, and now I can actually, you know, onward and upward from there and move forward.
Right, that's great.
Yeah.
And it's good too, like people see that, I don't know how to say this, that sometimes people get diagnosed with PTSD and they retire from the first responder world, because you're still serving in the first responder world and managing your symptoms, right? Or your PTSD.
Yeah, so right now I'm actually on a leave, and I decided to, I was doing it though for a couple of years, managing it, but what I really needed to do was my own self-care.
Okay.
So I ended up going to a treatment facility in Nanaimo, British Columbia, called Edgewood. It was the best thing that I ever did. It was a program designed for military and first responders, which was nice because I'm both. So yeah, so it was good, and I can honestly say that Edgewood and the things that I learned there saved my life.
That's great. And another thing that you're really proud of is the Wounded Warriors too. How has that affected your life?
Yeah, so when in 2011, when my symptoms really started kicking in very heavy, I started getting a lot of anxiety attacks, panic attacks, things like that, and I didn't really know where to turn. So I had started playing music at that time professionally, and I was writing down my traumas and whatnot in song, and I reached out to Wounded Warriors Canada, and they kind of welcomed me with open arms. I ended up doing a concert series in Saskatchewan and getting flown out there by Wounded Warriors.
Wow.
Yeah, and when I did it, I originally I was going out there to be a performer, and then I ended up talking with so many people who were battling post-traumatic stress, who were battling just many various significant operational stress injuries, and it was probably one of the most intense moments that I'd kind of ever gone through, where it was just I felt like I was home again. I felt like I could just really relate to these people, and from there I owe a lot to Wounded Warriors. I think that they helped me find myself in that time period of my life. So.
Right, and is that where the As a Song Is Forever, did that kind of come out of that experience then, your foundation?
Yeah, so this A Song Is Forever, the ASIF Foundation, that kind of happened this year. So I just created this foundation along with the Singing Soldiers with a friend of mine, Chris Earle, who's a current serving member of the forces right now, and together we're both we're really pushing the A Song Is Forever Foundation, because there's some people that can actually sit down and talk to a therapist. Mm-hmm. I was not one of those people.
Right.
So the way that and again, everybody's different, but the way that I really felt the easiest and best way for me to express my emotions was to do it with pen and paper and in a musical way. So I began this guitar company called the A Song Is Forever, ASIF Guitar Company, and throughout our foundation, every guitar that's sold, all the money goes back into the foundation. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially a non-for-profit, and we provide veterans and first responders who are battling with operational stress injuries a different avenue of therapy. Okay. And that's kind of where the Guitar Hero comes into play. And what we do actually too is an etch. So we have a nice etching machine, and we'll do an etch on each guitar, essentially to show what that person did or how it relates to them in their job. So we ended up just giving a guitar similar to this to a World War II veteran at the Havelock Jamboree this year, which was which was incredible. So we're very proud of the guitars and how the foundation's running, and just as I said, the support is amazing, and it's just different for people, which is nice.
Yeah, that's what we've been hearing about in this documentary, that different modalities work different ways. Some people like to do some heavy exercise, some people like to go for a run, some people like to chat to a therapist, like you said, and some people like yourself like to play music.
Yeah, and that's it. Like there's no right or wrong way of doing it. Right. I mean, essentially, if whatever works for that person, and I mean, I found personally that music has been the biggest help for me, not only listening to it, but playing it and writing music and learning how to do that. So that's kind of what we're teaching other people too. And the foundation's partnered up with different organizations such as Wounded Warriors, Music Healing Veterans, Spartan Wellness. So it's really great. It's a lot of fun too.
Good, awesome. I'm glad you're having fun doing it.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Right on.
what it's all about.
Was that the difficult part of your journey to get here? Was to figure out which of those modalities worked for you? Would you say was that the hardest part, figuring out which of those helped you to cope with the PTSD?
No, I'd say the hardest part for me was finding community. So there's something in a community of people where, if you think about like any recovery stage of it could be addictions recovery, it could be addiction to food, it could be addiction to anything really. The biggest problem that I've seen and found in myself, that the hardest thing to do is to try and get over something when you think you're alone.
Right.
So when you think you're alone in something, it's pretty hard. But similar to first response and military, we work together as a team, and we're taught to work together as a team, right? So that's where coping and dealing with PTSD works for me. It's finding that community with other people, and that way when we come together as a community, we can relate to each other, and then you can understand that you're really not alone. And it's easy for a lot of people to say, oh, you're not alone, but it's hard for somebody who's actually diagnosed to understand that. But when you actually do understand it, it is almost like a weight being lifted off your shoulders.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we hear about that a lot too, that, the stigma and stuff, and people just saying, oh, you're not alone, don't worry about it. But maybe we need to take that extra step to sit down and figure out what's happening, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there is still a stigma. And realistically, I think the stigma is getting better, but it's getting dropped. Like, the problem is that if I was diagnosed or not diagnosed and I'm still suffering, but I don't know what's going on with me, well, how can I really ask for help when I don't know what's happening with me?
Right.
Because a lot of people are covering it up, just as I was with addictions, to be honest with you. It's alcohol, it's anger, frustration, resentments, things like that. And I mean, realistically, it's hard to ask for help too, especially in our roles. And I totally understand where people don't want to ask for help. I get it, because it's a hard thing to do. It's probably the hardest thing to do, especially as a first responder or a military member, or a veteran. Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I think the strongest thing in the world and the most painful thing in the world is admitting defeat, right?
Right.
And when you admit defeat in something like operational stress injuries, it actually, I can personally say this from my own experience, that it makes you feel stronger.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing this.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Is there a way people can find out more information about the ASIF Foundation if they've got a family member that they're watching and they think this would be perfect for my family member?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to asifguitars.com. That's ASIFguitars.com. You can go to thesingingsoldiers.com, which is www.singingsoldiers, just as it sounds. Yep. Don't worry, we're not a bunch of guys who are going to sing Danny Boy. So it's more like outlaw country music style. Cool. But and then also for everybody out there who needs programs for their families, for their friends, for their community, woundedwarriors.ca. Right. So go to Wounded Warriors. I'm proud to be a national ambassador with Wounded Warriors. And I'm proud to represent them at different locations, including this one.
Thank you so much. Well, obviously, like you said, with the Wounded Warriors too, it's been a big impact on your life, so they're probably happy to have you as an ambassador too.
Well, and I'm happy to be with them as well. So it's a great partnership and relationship, and it's all for a great cause. Everything is for a great cause. Good. Well, thank you so much, Grail. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. Here now with John Walters, who's in sales at Leslie Ford in Wingham. And John, thanks so much for coming, and thank you again for Leslie Ford to support this event. What does it mean to Leslie Ford to support the event?
Yeah, absolutely. We really do appreciate the opportunity to work with the Invisible Wounds. Very good cause. And PTSD is an important issue. It's something that's real, and it's something that needs to be out there in the open. So for Leslie Motors to be a part of this, it's very special. Absolutely.
And we should back up and let the viewers know that you're a volunteer firefighter out of Wingham?
Out of Howick.
Oh, Howick, okay.
Yes.
Good, not too far away from Wingham.
No, not too far away at all. Yeah, you know what? Leslie Motors has been very generous to me personally in regards to being able to work with the schedule that sometimes a volunteer firefighter holds.
Right.
You know, the pager goes off at any time, and sometimes you're at the mercy of your employer to give you that leverage. And you know, Leslie Motors has been very supportive of that, and you know, I'm really appreciative to work for a company that supports the volunteers and the first responders in our community. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a big thing in this area. Like mostly once you get north of kind of Kitchener, we're all volunteers in Grey and Bruce and
Yes.
Huron and Perth and some of Wellington County as well too.
Absolutely, yes. Lots of volunteer departments around here. You know, this issue of PTSD is something that's you know, been brought forward even in our own department. Everything from creating these intervention teams that I know other local departments are doing as well. And like I said, creating the awareness for this issue, very important. And not only just the ways to recognize when maybe someone is suffering, and ways to even help, maybe not prevent, because sometimes you can't plan these things, right? But ways to know what to look for and ways to deal with it, and making sure people understand it's okay to talk about it.
Right.
It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you you know, unable to do your job. It's important to know that you know, your fellow first responders, firemen, police, military members, that they can talk to one another about these kind of issues. It's very important.
Yeah, well, thank you so much again for yourself to come and talk about that briefly.
Absolutely.
As a volunteer firefighter, thank you for your service to the Howick area.
Not a problem.
And thank you to Leslie Motors for supporting that.
Absolutely. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
I'm here now with Jen Gregg, a body language specialist. And Jen, you were a serving firefighter for 27 years before coming to this role. Why, after 27 years, did you switch careers? What was the impetus for that?
I loved being a volunteer firefighter. I loved being in the fire service, and I taught up at the fire college. But I got to a point where I found that my reasons for being in it weren't in alignment anymore. Like, I felt like I was kind of in it for the wrong reasons, and I was ready to kind of take a step back from being a first responder.
So what is that body language training then? Like what was a body language coach?
One of the things that I always struggled with was anxiety, and I have a history of depression as well, but anxiety was the big one for me, and I wanted to find a way to overcome that, and I came across Vanessa Van Edwards' TED Talk. I went to her website and I found out about this program she offered. I took the program and I became a body language trainer, and in the process I learned to develop more confidence in myself and deeper communication and more presence, and it helped me personally, and it was something that I could apply professionally as well.
Cool. So then how does that apply professionally to helping the first responder world, that training?
Being able to understand how you carry your body and how you carry yourself, and some of the actions that you do that inhibit conversations or that you can do to encourage conversations is so helpful for anybody, but especially in emergency services when we're trying to treat patients or we're doing public education. You want to seize that opportunity to connect with that person and provide most support. And we're largely unaware of what we do with our body. We're mostly focused on the words we say.
Right.
And body language is so much more powerful than the words we use. So it's all fascinating.
So Jen, what's your best advice for first responders who are experiencing mental health challenges then, with all your training and experience you've had?
Definitely to reach out to someone. Even if you don't feel comfortable, if you have a peer support team and they don't feel comfortable maybe reaching out to members of their team because they know them because they're in their hall, talk to somebody that you're comfortable with and that you trust.
So Jen, how does the body language affect mental health then?
Well, because everything's interconnected, obviously. You can't feel bad about yourself or have negative thoughts about yourself and not show that in your body language, right? If you're not feeling good, you're going to be in a lower power position, kind of slumped. You tend to fold in on yourself, as opposed to when you're feeling calm and confident and good about yourself. You just tend to naturally kind of take up more space because you feel safer. And they're interconnected. So if you're having negative thoughts and you're not feeling good about yourself, it's going to show in your body language. Body language is something that you can easily kind of adjust, whereas sometimes it's harder to get out of a negative thinking pattern. So our thoughts and feelings affect how we carry ourselves.
Well, it's really cool that you're applying it to the first responder world, having come from that world, but it really sounds like this could be applied on a daily basis for almost anybody.
Yeah.
Just better body posture and thinking about the way you're positioning yourselves and the way you're interacting with other people, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I love the part that a lot of the stuff that I've learned in body language too are tools that I can give to like the people listening tomorrow to watch for in their fellow firefighters and their family members.
Well, if people wanted to learn more about this body language training, you have coaching you offer to people, where could they go to get more information?
I have a website. It's jennifergregcoaching.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jen.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Adam, and we're here now with George Hebblethwaite from the Deputy Chief of the Hanover Police Service. And George, you're the Master of Ceremonies, so to say, for this year's conference. What does that mean to you to be here and be the Master of Ceremonies?
Well, it's actually my second time. I was here last year as well. I was just a newly appointed Deputy Chief. I have basically a year under my belt in the role. It's been a fast year. And coming back here is quite important for a lot of reasons, personal and professional. Mm-hmm. The purpose of what we're doing today is critically important to first responders, be it police, fire, paramedic. Right. And the timing of it is somewhat ironic. A very dear friend of mine, 30 plus years, is 4 weeks ago today, was admitted to hospital in a suicidal state. Wow. And directly related to on-the-job issues, and in his case, probably a cumulative effect versus a singular event. So much of what we'll hear today and what we've heard in the past addresses that exact situation. So you can read about it, you can talk about it, you can experience pieces of it, you can have lived experience personally, which so many first responders have, and then occasionally it'll hit directly home, and it gets your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so that's a big reason, obviously, for yourself personally. What does it mean for the Hanover Police Service to be represented here then?
Very important. We're a small but robust and vibrant and tight-knit community in the townships, Bruce and Grey townships and counties. And we work very, very closely together. I mean, we leave Hanover to assist the OPP in the Walkerton area from time to time, and they do the same for us. And West Grey Police Service, we assist them in the townships in their direction, and they come into our town. So as much as we have different shoulder flashes and different employers, we're all there for the same reason. Right. And we help each other, we support each other, and we do what we can to make sure we all go home at the end of our shifts safe and sound. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on for a brief minute just to explain that part. And thank you again for emceeing the Master of Ceremonies this year. I know Deborah appreciates that, George. Good. And thank you so much. We're here now with Ed Jermal, a officer who's had 20 years of experience in municipal policing. And Ed, just so we could start, you had been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is, like you were saying before we got started, a collection of events over time. How did you get that diagnosis? What things stopped you from getting the diagnosis or treatment earlier?
The diagnosis came in September of 2016. Again, it was after a long period of time, probably 5 years of just different incidents that affected me, but in effect I didn't deal with them. So the way it was explained to me is traumas are like unpaid bills, and these bills get filed away, we forget about them, and then all of a sudden they come due. So when I really started having problems was when all of these emotions, all of these traumas came out, and that in effect is how I got the diagnosis.
Right. And then, so was there steps then to getting the diagnosis, and then a plan for yourself for after the diagnosis?
Yeah, so at first, just like I'd kind of done for many years, I tried to deny that there was something wrong. Finally, I had an amazing psychologist and an amazing family doctor who basically took control, and once we had the diagnosis, then we started a plan, and it was a coordinated effort. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, and while it doesn't cure the disorder or the injury, it does help you to navigate through triggers and things like that.
Right, and so then you have sort of modalities that you know work for you that can help, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's we like to call it tools. So we have some tools in the toolbox that kind of help you navigate this new thing.
Right. And so you were mentioning earlier too that it took you a little while to realize yourself that you were needing help. What would you say to other first responders that are maybe in that same boat?
First and foremost, I think shame, fear, all those things come into play. As type A personalities and so-called fixers, we often think that we're the last line of defense and who can fix us. We're also ashamed because we spend a lot of time being in that primary role where we are there to help people in their worst times. I would say to first responders, to family members, to anybody who's having issues with any type of mental illness, the shame is what will keep feeding the illness. If you speak the shame, the illness can't live. So reaching out is huge. Getting help with a professional is huge, and just talking about it. Because a lot of times we think that we're alone, when in fact the person beside us is also struggling.
Do you find conferences like this and yourself speaking at the conference today help to that effect? That we're just here today talking about it openly?
Absolutely. I came here, I got my diagnosis in 2016, and I came to the Invisible Wounds conference that fall. Oh. And I had, for the first time, experienced hope. There was people here talking about things that I was experiencing, and it clicked for me. And I saw people that had come out the other side, so to speak, and it gave me hope, and it gave me the encouragement to work hard through a lot of the therapy and to move forward, and to realize that yes, I'm in a situation where I'm dealing with PTSD, but it doesn't have to be a death sentence. It doesn't have to be a life sentence. So these types of conferences, I think, are huge in terms of helping people, creating awareness, and bringing it out into the light.
Ed, so before you were diagnosed, were there any warning signs that you were kind of ignoring and pushing off to the side?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they say hindsight's 20/20. I think the biggest thing was family members. My wife noticed something was wrong. Detachment, numbness, isolation, and I was just not myself.
Right.
But again, at that point, I felt like, I guess in some ways, it was a situation where I didn't realize maybe, or I didn't think it was to the extent that it was. As time went on, physical symptoms, flashbacks at night, waking up at night soaked in sweat, anxiety, irritability, all sorts of different physical manifestations as a result. So I would say that yes, there was a lot of warning signs, and again, I think shame, ego, fear of stigma, fear of admitting there actually was a problem were all kind of barriers that stopped me from looking at it further. Right. So what I would do is just move on and take on bigger challenges. And I guess in some way that's kind of a self-medication, because for all the traumas or the bad feelings, if you had successes, then it was it kind of helped to make you feel better, but really it was just masking the problem.
Right. So how has this experience then changed yourself since you've had your diagnosis? You mentioned coming to the first Invisible Wounds conference and having a huge experience there. How else has it changed your life?
Well, there's something that I've learned about called compensation theory, and it looks at the idea of when something happens, it could be something undesirable. I mean, PTSD is not something desirable, but one of the things I think, one of the ways it has changed me is I've started to live again for the first time in a long time. I started to appreciate all the good things in life. I have hope, and there's an old saying, I don't know where it originated, but it says that you can't see the stars or the beauty of the stars without the darkness. Okay. And even though there was the darkness and there are still days like that, I think what it does is it helps me appreciate everything in my life, and I'm grateful for that.
Great. Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're doing this talk today and talking with first responders, and thank you so much for coming on to share your experiences with our viewers.
Thanks for having me.
We're here now with Chief Mike Belay of the Saugeen Shores Police Service up in Port Elgin and Southampton area. And Chief Belay, what does it mean to you, being the Chief of the Saugeen Shores Police and other local municipal force, to be here at the Invisible Wounds Conference?
Well, when Deb McDonald contacted me and asked me to be a part of this, I wasn't aware of this conference, and then when she explained, what this was all about, I was more than happy to come along. It's such a prevalent piece in policing and emergency services today. I've been a police officer for over 31 years, and care for people suffering from PTSD. When I started compared to today, we've grown leaps and bounds, and I think it's such an important thing. Officers take care of their physical health and that type of thing, but often we don't take the time to make sure that our mental health is well as well. So, it's something very important. It's something very important to me. We've done a number of things, and we're introducing a lot of things in Saugeen Shores to make sure that that people are mentally well. And it's for us, it's more of a proactive approach than a reactive approach. Instead of waiting for things to happen and then how do we help this person, we want to put things in place, and we have put things in place where it's more proactive and giving people the tools to make sure that they're able to deal with these things. In policing, when people start policing, some of the things that the traumatic events that you deal with sometimes daily, sometimes people aren't ready for those. Right. So, we are human beings, and it's a good thing to have those tools in the toolbox to identify them and how do I get through this. So for me to come to this conference, and I'm looking forward to listening to all the speakers as well, right. To see their shared experiences and just see how everything goes. So
yeah, and you mentioned that stigma after your over 3 decades of policing. It's changed a lot. I would hope, I'm going to say for the better.
Oh, absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. So yeah, I know when I was a young officer, some traumatic things happened, and a supervisor pulled me into his office and basically said, "You're good, right?"
Wow.
And that was it. And I was like, "No, I'm not." Right. But it was that stigma, right? So you just kind of said, "Oh, I'm fine," and off you went. But then you kind of had to find your own help. Right, and whether it be family or friends or that type of thing, and now the things that are available to us, it's important that officers tap into that so that they are well.
Good. Well, thank you so much for coming today, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for watching our documentary on the mental health and stigma surrounding first responders, and how we're working to improve the culture and working to improve the lives of first responders all across Canada and quite possibly the world with some of the organizations we've heard about today. If you want more information about the Invisible Wounds conferences, you can visit www.invisible-wounds.ca. I want to spend special thanks to Deborah McDonald, the founder of Invisible Wounds, for allowing us to come out and talk with these speakers today. I want to say a special thank you to her husband, Bruce McDonald, who did a lot of legwork and logistics helping make this happen. And Leslie Ford for sponsoring the documentary, and John Walters coming on. Thank you so much, Leslie Ford, and to all the people we had in the documentary. A special thank you to you for sharing your experiences and how you've grown and moved forward. So again, invisible-wounds.ca. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Adam Olivero.